YouTube, Dosm Writer here, and welcome to my annual best and worst of video for 2023. So as usual, this video starts with Toku related stuff and core stuff for the channel, and then, some off-topic stuff just for fun. It was a very interesting year in regards to Toku. For PR, obviously, it was a very quiet year with only some big news coming in at the very end. Like, for the most part, we just had the couple of comics, the announcement of Power Rangers Prime, which was exciting. I was glad that the comics were continuing because, of course, you remember it seemed like that was going to be winding down too, but instead we just did kind of like an Ultimate Universe version of it, which is really cool. But outside of that, we just kind of had some random, third-party merch. There's a couple cool things, but a very quiet period, It seemed like we might have that for several years, but then we had that surprise news, like right on Christmas, that we're developing a new reboot with Paramount. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but it is at least exciting. Like, it's funny because going into next year, I am really looking forward to getting more updates and seeing how it evolves, and if we actually get concrete stuff and casting and details, but I'm not looking forward to the discourse. I'm already exhausted of that discourse coming back in the last few days, but that was really interesting because it was a relatively boring year for the Power Rangers stuff, but then it wound up being pretty exciting right there at the end. As far as Sentai goes, I think it's been a very fine year. I hate to always bring up Gotchard comparisons, but I can't help but bring up the fact that, Geats was a high point for me for writer in terms of being a more innovative series, and then they went back to basics with Gotchard, but it was like too back to basics and worse, and it killed my enthusiasm, and I was worried about the same thing happening for Sentai, where we had King Odra, which was a little bit more different and more serialized, and then Boom Boomger was touted as back to basics. And while it was, I think it's been solid enough that it's at least kept me entertained and got me to still be excited for Go Juger. It wasn't like Gotchard, where it took me into Gav, not being excited for Gav at all. So I think it's been a pretty normal year for Sentai. Like, it's got its ups and downs. I've been enjoying it fine. No huge peaks, but it's been overall enjoyable, and it's definitely got me excited for Go Juger. Like, even though I'm very apprehensive about the anniversary elements, I really like what I'm seeing from the designs, and I think the concept looks pretty cool. As far as writer, I'm just so thankful Gav brought my enthusiasm back. Gotchard, like I've mentioned ad nauseum, really killed my enthusiasm, and going into Gav, I was just completely the opposite of going into Gotchard. I just wasn't excited, and thankfully Gav has really brought back my enthusiasm for it. Like, it's probably the thing I'm enjoying most. But I just wanted to talk about a little bit of a recap there before we started. Obviously, after the first of the year, I will be doing my, what I want to see out of Sentai Rider and PR videos, so keep an eye out for those. But let's get on to the actual awards, the very prestigious awards, where I didn't even think about making a little trophy for. I don't even know why I'm bringing that up. Where am I going with this bit? I don't know. So let's start with Best Toku and Worst Toku of the Year. And as always, just like with my top list, this is my opinion. This isn't an objective list. There is no such thing as an objective ranking list. It's all an opinion. So, for me, Best Toku of the Year, obviously, without question, is Gav. Boom Boonger I like fine. The current Power Rangers series doesn't exist. And you know how I feel about Gotchard, but it would win by default. Gav really has been so great. I think it's a good mix of, it's very on formula, back to formula, but it's got enough unique about it that it doesn't feel completely cliche. While Gotchard felt like the most on-point formulaic writer, if not worse than that, Gav, I think wields it very well. And it's one of those classic things I really like where you have a theme that unexpectedly works well. Like, the candy theme very much brings the poppy charm and the goofiness, but yet the way they craft it into the mythology is not only interesting, but it has it so you can take it seriously, not in a, like, Gaim should be on HBO, seriously, but you know what I mean. Like, it's interesting when you have those series, sometimes when they have more humorous and silly elements, it can undermine the moments where it wants you to be invested in the storyline or the characters, and Gav does a great job at actually weaving that together really well. It has a great cast of characters. It's like everything Gotchard does, it does the opposite way. So it's not just that it wins by default, but these last 16 episodes, I think, as of this recording, have just been great. Like, I really have been enjoying it. I've been so tempted to even buy the toys. Of course, you guys probably know, and I'm not going to go on too long about it, but my worst is Gotchard. I've talked about it enough ad nauseum. If you're interested in my thoughts for, like, why does he hate Gotchard, just go to literally, like, any of my reviews after, like, episode 5 or the series review. You guys know it was a low point for me. I already even talked about it, so I don't need to go on about it further. So now we have Toku Movie of the Year and Worst Toku Movie of the Year. I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch a lot of Toku movies. When I was catching up on Geats, I did catch up on a few movies then, and I made kind of like a list of, like, all the movies for Sentai and Rider that I wanted to catch up on. And I hate that this keeps coming up, but like Gotchard really stalled my enthusiasm, so my momentum at catching up on those, as well as my drive to watch the current ones coming out, kind of lessened. So I didn't get to watch as many this year. So for the best one for me, and again, keep in mind I only watched a very small handful, was the Kaku Ranger Returns movie. You know, I have a soft spot for Kaku Ranger. Also, I think soft spot is my phrase of the year. I've used that in so many videos, but I do have a soft spot for that series. It's one of my favorite Sentai series. It's one that when I first watched, I was like, eh. And then when I rewatched it and kind of gave it more my full attention, I really fell in love with it. It's a great series, kind of akin to Aba Ranger for me, where I think it's a great example of a Sentai that encapsulates like all Sentai can be. It can be goofy and silly, but it also can be serious with great character stories, and also it has a good mix of like individual storylines for each character, but also an overall story, and it's got a unique structure, and I just love the series. So I was really excited actually to see them back, and it was a very simple special, but I enjoyed it. I wish it had been like 40-ish minutes instead of 30, like maybe an hour or more sometimes is too much depending on what it is, but I wish it had been a little bit longer. But I do like that it kind of structured itself like it was just an episode. Like they had the opening, the ending, even the little title card and like the commercial break, and it made it feel like an episode, and it kind of captured what I liked about the Aba Ranger special from last year, where it almost felt like an episode. I think Aba Ranger, I know people had mixed feelings on the Aba Ranger storyline. Setting that aside, I think that was the best I've ever seen it capturing almost the exact feel of watching Aba Ranger back in the day. And this felt like a midway point where it felt like a modern Returns movie, but definitely did feel like a Kaku Ranger episode. It was also like neat and unique to see them coming back at an older age and incorporate that into the storyline, kind of like with Aba Ranger incorporating some modern stuff into the storyline. And I like that it was kind of a mix of like the reason why we had these new villains. It was a little on the nose about like, oh, toxic negativity online created villains. I'm like, yeah, they're called fans. I really enjoyed it. Like, it was just kind of a nice little surprise and quick and simple. I haven't gotten to see the Deca Ranger one yet. Before I watched it, I wanted to rewatch the 10 Years After special and the Gavin one because I never watched the Gavin one because I just don't like the Metal Hero stuff. So I haven't gone to watch it yet because I only rewatched the 10 Years After one, and I didn't want to rush it. Like, I didn't want to force myself because that like always like hinders your enjoyment. But the 10 Years After one I liked more than I remembered. Like, I didn't remember hating it, I just didn't remember it. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. But what I'm going to do instead, because I've taken so long, is sometime next year I'm going to do a ranking of all the return specials, but I just want to take my time and enjoy them. Anyway, as far as worst, you know, like I said, I haven't seen a lot of them, so this isn't worst like and I hate it, but it was the one that was the most disappointing, which is both of the King Oger crossover movies with Kyoryuger and Dawn Brothers. Like, I didn't hate these. I wasn't like clawing my own eyes out. They were just both kind of disappointing. Dawn Brothers felt like it was just a classic, almost condensed version of a Toku team-up where there was misunderstanding and fights, and it felt like it kind of got underserved in favor of the fact that we had to do the Kyoryuger stuff. And then the Kyoryuger one was disappointing because I had such mixed feelings on the Kyoryuger inclusion in King Oger overall. Like, the two-parter episode that they put in King Oger worked so well, way better than I thought it would, but everything after that just made me wish that they had just concentrated and did a Kyoryuger Returns movie and just left King Oger alone, because I hated all the post-appearances of Kyoryuger after the first two-parter, but I was thinking, you know, the movie might be pretty good because they don't have to worry about folding it into the series. They already did a good job of mixing the mythologies, and it just wound up being a really weird, convoluted mess. And it was disappointing because I felt like it had potential. In a way, it kind of reminded me, this is going to be a weird example, but of the Beast Morphers Dino team-up, where I had no expectations going in, and it started strong, and I'm like, oh, maybe this will be good, and then it ended weak, and that's kind of what it was with this, where it started strong with the crossover in the series, and I'm like, even though I would rather this be a separate thing, this movie has the potential to be good because they blended the mythologies together so well, and it just wound up being a mess. So, and I haven't seen the Gotchard movie yet. I don't know if that would have been the worst just because it's Gotchard. I do kind of want to watch it at some point, but I also like don't want to ruin my day, you know? Alright, now we go on to the character categories. So Toku Hero of the Year, best and worst. So best Toku Hero of the Year, I didn't have a pick for this that was like, yes, that's it. Like, sometimes you're making this list for your favorite movie or show or character and you immediately know that's who it is. And I didn't have somebody that stood out like that, but I did want to give it to Shoma, because for me, Shoma proved that you can have that sort of wide-eyed, idealistic type of character that we have for Ryder, but actually make him good. I still wish that we would have more variation in the protagonists. I still feel like 8 out of 10 of the protagonists in the last decade plus have been cut from the same cloth, and I wish we could get more variety. But whereas Hotaro was like, everything bad about this, Shoma shows that you can actually have a good character like this, where they can be quirky and endearing, but they can also be taken seriously and have characterization and not feel like a walking catchphrase. Like, they feel like a human being. Not to mention his, like, fish out of water aspect of him being a granite makes that quirkiness make sense. And when he gets serious, whether it's in the suit, he can actually feel badass, or when he's like in a civilian fight on occasion and he gets a stern look on his face, I can actually take him seriously. Like, I could never take Hotaro seriously. Like, I've seen babies with a grumpy look that look more intimidating than Hotaro. So I wanted to give it to Shoma for proving to me, like, you can have, even though that's one of my least favorite type of characters, you can have that type of character and have me really like it. Now, for worst Toku hero, I was tempted to give it to Hotaro. I might have given it to that last year, but just in the effort to not give Hotaro all the flack in this review, and he's also going to be showing up in another category, I'm actually going to give it to Joe from Boom Boonjir. Like, I definitely hate Hotaro more, but I'm also just not a big fan of Joe. It's a very, in my opinion, disingenuous, cliche, overperformed performance. Like, there's definitely a fine line between, like, sometimes you have those genuine performances where you believe in the heroics, and then the over-the-top, and then sometimes you get a nice kind of in-between. In a way, Shoma's kind of in-between because he goes very cartoony, but when I want to believe in him, kind of like with Sento, I always bring up Sento, I can believe in him, but for me, I just don't like Joe. He's the only member of that cast I don't like. Like, I think Sakito is very underserved in that series, but I like the character and the actor, but I just do not like Joe. So, technically, I guess he would be number 2, but I wanted to give him that spot just because it's like, that'd be then too much Hotaro hate. Now, for Villain of the Year, Best Villain of the Year and Worst Villain of the Year, this was a tough one because I immediately knew who my worst Villain of the Year would be for Toku, but I couldn't think of a good one for Best because there has been some good ones. Like, I wouldn't say that they deserve the best, but I almost gave it to the sisters from Gotchard just for being one of the only consistent parts of the series. You know, Mad Rex was pretty cool and Boom Boonjir, but none of them, again, were like that, yes! So I decided to go a little bit unique for this category, and Toku Villain of the Year is Hotaro, because he is the villain of my story. Enough said. That's why, again, I gave the other one to Joe, because I knew this was coming up. And I didn't want every, like, worst list to be on the category to be Hotaro. Like, worst movie and TV show of the year, Hotaro. So, but for best villain, worst villain, excuse me, I gotta give it to Greyon. Like, his motivation is just the dumbest. Like, I know the gold thing ties into alchemy, but it was so one note. It wasn't even a full note, it was like a half note. It was so dumb and cartoony, and a series with already so much mess and missed potential. It was like one of the worst final villains, and I was upset he came back in general, but his motivation, again, it was just the dumbest. Now, this is usually where I would do toys, but obviously, as you know, outside of retro reviews coming back these last couple months, I've been cooling it on the toy reviews. I might be doing some Gojujir coverage, we'll have to see. I'm strongly considering at this moment. Let me know if you'd like to see that. But so I don't really have any best and worst stuff. You know, the only Sentai things I really got was the beginning of the year Boom Boonjir stuff, and then a couple figure arts. So, like, the figure arts were good, though, and like with Gotchard, with Gav, the only thing I got was this, the one that came with that little card, because I wanted one of these, but I do really like this, so this is my Toku Toy of the Year. Like, honestly, I would be surprised if I didn't end up with 1 or 2 more Gav-related things. So no toy stuff this year, but maybe next year. So now let's talk about movies. So this year I saw a lot more movies. You know, I started going to my local AMC last year after the other theater I used to go to that was kind of like behind my house went downhill, and I decided to try this year the AMC A-List thing, where you can see 3 movies a week, like at no extra cost on your subscription fee. And so I saw a lot more movies this year because I just wanted to see more movies, especially horror movies. So I had a lot to go for this one. And it's really funny because around, like, I want to say August, you know, I'd seen a lot of movies already, but I was thinking, you know, there's some movies I really liked this year: Deadpool, Wolverine, Dune, Planet of the Apes, Strange Darling, you know, but I couldn't think of one again that was like that. Yes, this is the one. And then along comes The Substance. I brought it up a couple times in my videos and made a couple references that a few people have gotten. And that movie, I still have not stopped thinking about it. It took me completely by surprise. It's a body horror movie about Demi Moore. I don't want to spoil it, but like the core premise is Demi Moore is like an aging actress who takes the substance to allow herself to turn younger. It sounds very basic, like something that's been done before, but definitely never seen anything like that before. Like the way they go about the mechanics of how she turned young, I've never seen before, and where it goes after that, I'd never seen before. And like I've been dying to talk about it with people and no one else has seen it, but it took me by surprise because I was only like tangentially aware of it. Like I sort of knew it existed, but I didn't know it was a horror movie until people were like, best movie you'll ever see, like you'll die if you don't see it. And eventually I had to see it, and it's funny because like earlier in the year there was a horror movie called Long Legs that got hyped up like, it's the scariest movie you ever see, you'll need to go straight to therapy after seeing it. And that got like overhyped. Like that was a good movie, I really liked it, but like Long Legs, they put the hype up here and then it was here, but The Substance, it was like the hype was up here and then the movie did that. So insane movie, absolutely recommended if you can handle a little body horror. Favorite movie of the year by far, would not have expected it. Now for worst movie, I had a hard time because in general I kind of like most movies for what they are, and I very rarely have one where I like hate it. But I had 2 candidates for worst movie, and One of them I kind of hated to make the pick because it's kind of cliche for a lot of lists. But the two picks I had, and I'll tell you which one was the winner, but was Joker, Fettuccine Alfredo, and Imaginary, which is a Blumhouse horror movie about like imaginary friends coming to life. And the thing is like, definitely Joker 2 was like a WTF moment, but it was one of those things too where the hate is over exaggerated and just fans love to just hate on everything and like get in on that hate. And I think that, you know, there was some good parts to it. Like the courtroom scene was good, there were some well shot scenes. I actually didn't mind the concept of the ending. You know, the fact that there's a rumor it was an FU to the audience makes me a little happy because the audience is just awful nowadays. But the thing is like, I was very mixed on it. I was mixed on the first Joker. Like I liked the first Joker, but I never really wanted to watch it again. Like, I watched it once again before the second one, but then after this one, I didn't know how I felt about it, and I even thought about seeing it again, and I just didn't want to see it again. And that's the thing, is that's why I decided to go with that over Imaginary as my worst movie of the year, because Imaginary is just a very generic horror movie. To be honest, I have a soft spot, there's that phrase again, but like a guilty pleasure of like, you know, generic Blumhouse horror movies. So I thought I would probably like this. The premise sounded fun. I'm like, it's probably not going to be great, but it's going to be a movie I'll probably throw on in the background in the future. But it felt like it was made by AI. It was the most generic thing. Like, I was shocked how bad it was, because usually I'm very forgiving of those movies. But the only reason I decided to give it to Joker for worst movie over this is because I thought about, like, if someone were to tell me, tomorrow, you can only watch one movie, and it's either Joker or Imaginary, what would you watch? It would be Imaginary. Like, I don't think I ever want to watch Joker again. Just something about both those movies, whether I like them or not, just the feeling it gives me, I just don't like it. So, yeah, it's unfortunate it's a generic pick. So for TV shows of the year, I had a couple of different candidates, and the one that I picked for best show of the year I actually just recently watched, and it might be one that you haven't heard of, but it's called Dark Matter. It's on Apple TV, not to be confused with the Dark Matter sci-fi series from years ago, which was actually pretty underrated. But this is a multiverse show, and I know that it's really cool to hate on the multiverse. I wish I was as cool as the people hating on the multiverse in the MCU, but time travel and multiverse are still my two favorite types of stories. But this isn't multiverse where it's like Wolverine's popping out. Like, it's about the many worlds theories and about the different like choices we make, and basic premise is like the main character gets kidnapped by an Earth 2 version of himself and swaps places, and he has to find his way back home. But it's really fascinating. It delves into like multiverse stuff that I really like, and it took me by surprise. Like, I got a month free Apple subscription, so I was like, I gotta watch last season of Ted Lasso. I also watched Severance, which was amazing. Even though that came out a few years ago, I almost gave it best show of the year just because I watched it. But then I checked out Dark Matter because I saw ads for it. So that wound up being my favorite of the year, with some honorable mentions being Fallout, which was really great, which actually almost got it before I watched Dark Matter this last month. Because, you know, I'm never the fan that's like, stay true to the source material. But it really did a great job of capturing the vibe of the games, so much so that I replayed some of New Vegas and Fallout 4 after this, just because it really put me in the mood for that. So I don't know if this would be best of the year, but like, I want to shout out Skeleton Crew for being so good. Like, I knew I was going to like it because, again, I'm not as cool as everyone that's a miserable person about Star Wars. I still love Star Wars. But I thought I was going to like it. I'm like, Goonies plus Star Wars seems like it'll be fun. I thought I would enjoy it, but I was surprised how good it is. Like, just in terms of the storyline is far more intriguing than you would ever think. I don't want to spoil it because going in, I had no idea the story was going to go the way it did. But yeah, that's been a fun show. As far as worst show, honestly, of like the regular type of shows I watch, I could not think of one to give the worst, so I'm going to give it to Gotchard, because that was legitimately the only show to make me mad this year. The last thing I wanted to talk about with shows was just real quick shout out to my favorite returning show. I didn't have a least favorite returning show, I guess Gotchard, but it didn't return, it never left, unfortunately. Well, I guess it did leave, you know what I mean. I just wanted to give a shout out for my favorite returning show of the year, Superman and Lois. So criminally underrated by so many people that are still prejudiced against the CW. Like, I'm a CW guy. You know, Arrowverse, Mystic Falls, Vampire Diaries, that's my lifeblood. Supernatural. So I like the CW, honestly, and I think we really lost something when that network went away. You know, but it's nothing like any of the other CW shows, like, at all. And it's highly underrated. It's a show that I really hope people discover in the future. Like, I hope that there's a big Superman boom after the movie and people find it on streaming, because even though it gets praise from the people that watch it, it's like criminally underrated, and it had such a fantastic final season. Now moving on to games just real quick, I don't have a worst game of the year because honestly I was really bad at games this year in terms of new stuff. Like I said, I did replay some of the Fallout games in the summer after I had watched Fallout, and I played a couple older games, like I dipped back into a couple Pokemon playthroughs I was doing, but I was really bad about new games. Like, the only new games I really played, and the Indiana Jones one I know just came out and I downloaded it on Game Pass, but I still haven't gotten to play it, but was the Star Wars Outlaws, Dragon Ball, and Pal World. And that was all I really played, so I'm just, again, going to be a hot take, because I really did enjoy Dragon Ball. It was such a cool throwback, such a we're filming right now. Such a well-detailed game, but for me, it was Star Wars Outlaws. I know it was a very generic, like, Ubisoft thing, and it had a lot of problems, but I loved getting to explore the Star Wars world in that point of view, and it had a lot of really cool characters and quirks. I didn't get to finish it yet, because I just haven't been in a gaming mood, but I really enjoyed my time with it so far. Special shout out to Power World, though. I really got sucked into that, like, at the beginning of the year, and had a lot more fun with that than I would have thought. Alright, very last, and this is a longer video than I was anticipating, but it's just comics. Now, I don't have a worst, really. I think my least favorite would probably just be the Unagi comic or whatever of Power Rangers. It wasn't bad, I just had no familiarity, or, well, not no familiarity, but no attachment to the Usagi character. So I guess that would be least favorite, but calling it worst would be harsh because I enjoyed it fine. But usually I give this to a Power Rangers comic, I believe, but I'm actually going to give it to the new Ultimate Spider-Man comic, which I didn't even know. I was like, did that come out this year? And I had to look it up, and it was exactly January. So that is really cool. They revived the Ultimate Universe, and obviously you guys know I'm a big Spider-Man fan, so it's not a surprise, but like, it's such a cool comic for several reasons. Like, it's like a perfect timing because a little while back I did like a deep dive on Secret Wars and all that stuff to prepare for the Avengers stuff, and read the Hickman comics and watched like video essays on it. And so it's funny because the convoluted reason that this universe exists, this new version of the Ultimate Universe, is extremely complicated and tied to the Secret Wars storyline. And so I love it for that, and it's got this bigger convoluted story going on with that, but then the personal story of it is so good. So it's this really good mix of this crazy multiversal reason why that universe exists now, because the old one was wiped out. But then the grounded story of it is as simple as it's Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man when he's an adult married with kids. And there's all these different variations, and it's very fascinating because it feels very Spider-Man to its core, and yet it's so different. And I love getting to explore the like personal elements of it that are very different, but also the larger like crazy universe stuff. So that was really good. You know, runner-up for just a Power Rangers comic pick, I will say that I really enjoyed Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Return. I didn't think I would hate it or anything, but I wasn't as excited for it, and I was really pleasantly surprised by what an interesting world that was. Anyways, guys, that is my list for the year. Thank you to all of you that continue to stick around with this channel. I know I don't always make it easy, but we have a pretty exciting year ahead of us with Go Jujer. Like I said, let me know if you'd like to see me do toy reviews for that. Power Rangers news coming back this year, and as you've already seen, retro reviews are back in full force. But until next time, let me know what some of your favorite things of the year were. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dosm Rider, signing out.